poor boy whispers to millionaire in restaurant haven't eaten in 3 days, not knowing that he is the owner of the place. Before we embark on this incredible journey, write down where you're watching from in the comments below. This story will touch your heart in ways you never expected. Let's go. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across Theodore Blackwell's solitary figure as he cut his prime steak with surgical precision. At 42, the CEO of Blackwell Industries had mastered the art of dining alone at the exclusive Meridian Club, where conversations were conducted in whispers and everything had a price tag that would make ordinary people weep. Theo barely glanced up when the commotion started near the kitchen doors. A small figure darted between tables, clutching what looked like a crumpled napkin. The child couldn't have been older than 7, his clothes hanging loose on his thin frame, dirt smudged across his pale cheeks. "Get out of here, you little street rat." Marcus, the head waiter, grabbed the boy's arm roughly. "This isn't a soup kitchen." The dining room fell silent. Wealthy patrons turned in their chairs, some disgusted, others merely curious about the disturbance interrupting their expensive meals. Theo should have looked away. Should have continued eating his perfectly prepared dinner. Should have let Marcus handle the situation, as he always did, with undesirables who somehow slipped past security. Instead, something made him stand. His voice cut through the room, like a blade. Marcus froze, still gripping the child's thin arm. "What's going on here?" The boy looked up at Theo with eyes too old for his face, blue and desperate. His lips were chapped, his small hands trembling. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwell," Marcus stammered, recognizing the power in the room. "This kid snuck in begging for food. Let's just let him go." Theo's command was quiet but absolute. Marcus released the boy, who stumbled backward but didn't run. Instead, he looked directly at Theo, tears threatening to spill. "Please, sir," the child whispered, his voice barely audible. "I haven't eaten in 3 days." The words hit Theo like a physical blow. 3 days. This child, who looked like he weighed less than Theo's briefcase, hadn't eaten in 3 days. "What's your name?" Theo asked, kneeling to the boy's eye level. "Mason." "Sir?" The response came with a hiccup of suppressed tears. Theo glanced around the room full of people who could buy and sell small countries, then back at Mason's hollow cheeks and desperate eyes. "Marcus," Theo said, standing slowly, "bring Mason whatever he wants from the kitchen. Put it on my account." The dining room erupted in murmurs. Theodore Blackwell, known for his ruthless business dealings and cold demeanor, was feeding a street child. But as Mason whispered thank you with genuine wonder, as if kindness was a foreign concept, Theo felt something crack open in his chest. Something he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed, as Mason devoured his first real meal in days. He looked up at Theo with grateful eyes and said words that would change everything. "Sir, will you help me save my mama from the bad man?" Theo stared at Mason, the child's question hanging in the air like a challenge. The bad man. Something twisted in Theo's stomach as he recognized the fear in those young eyes, a fear he remembered from his own childhood. "Where is your mama, Mason?" Theo asked gently, abandoning his half-finished dinner. "At home with him?" Mason's voice dropped to a whisper. "Derek. He gets really angry when he drinks, and mama, ... She can't run anymore." 20 minutes later, Theo's black Bentley pulled up to a rundown trailer park on the outskirts of town. The contrast between his world and this one was jarring. Rusted metal homes, broken streetlights, and the smell of desperation hanging thick in the air. Mason led him to a weathered blue trailer, his small hand trembling as he turned the unlocked door handle. "Mama?" he called softly. "I brought help." The scene inside made Theo's blood freeze. Linda lay motionless on the kitchen floor, her blonde hair matted with blood, a purple bruise spreading across her swollen cheek. Empty beer bottles littered the counter, and a chair lay overturned nearby. "Mama." Mason dropped to his knees beside her, his small hands hovering over her face, afraid to touch. "Mama, wake up." Theo immediately dialed 911, his business training kicking in, even as rage built in his chest. Who could do this to a woman? Mother. As they waited for the ambulance, Mason's voice broke through Theo's fury. His name is Derek Stone. He married Mama last year, but he's not my daddy. My real daddy died when I was little. Derek Stone. The name echoed in Theo's mind, familiar but distant. Like a half-remembered nightmare, Linda's eyes fluttered open, just as sirens wailed in the distance. She saw Theo first and panicked, trying to crawl backward. "No, please, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to make him angry." "Mama, it's okay." Mason rushed to calm her. "This is Theo. He helped me. He's nice." Linda's frightened gaze moved between her son and the impeccably dressed stranger kneeling in her destroyed kitchen. You don't understand," she whispered, touching her bruised face. "Derek said if I ever tried to leave, if I ever told anyone, her voice broke completely. "He said he'd kill us both." The ambulance doors slammed shut as Theo realized he'd just entered a war he never saw coming. St. Mary's Hospital emergency room hummed with controlled chaos, but for Theo, everything felt suspended in slow motion. He sat in the waiting area, Mason curled against his side like a frightened animal seeking warmth. "They're helping Mama, right?" Mason asked for the third time, his small fingers clutching Theo's expensive suit jacket. "Yes," Theo said softly, surprised by how naturally protective he felt toward this child he'd known for barely 2 hours. "The doctors are very good here." Through the treatment room window, Theo watched medical staff tend to Linda's injuries. The lead physician emerged 20 minutes later, his expression grim. "Mrs. Stone has a concussion, 3 cracked ribs, and severe bruising," Dr. Martinez reported. This wasn't her first assault. We're seeing evidence of repeated trauma over several months. Theo's jaw clenched. "Will she be okay?" "Physically, yes." "But Mr. Blackwell, double quotes," the doctor paused, glancing at Mason. "This pattern will likely continue unless intervention occurs." While Linda rested, Mason found paper and crayons at the children's activity station. With surprising skill for a 7-year-old, he began sketching. When he finished, he shyly handed Theo the drawing. It was a portrait of mastically Theo, rendered with careful detail and an artist's eye. At the bottom, Mason had written in crooked letters, "My hero." "This is incredible, Mason," Theo said, genuinely amazed. "You have real talent." "Ah!" Mason beamed, the first genuine smile Theo had seen from him. "Excuse me?" A gruff voice interrupted them. "I'm looking for my wife, Linda Stone." Theo looked up and felt his blood turn to ice. The man standing before them was older, harder, with cruel eyes and alcohol on his breath. But Theo recognized him. Instantly, Derek Stone, the boy who had made his school years a living hell 25 years ago. The bully who had shoved his head in toilets, stolen his lunch money, and convinced everyone that Theodore Blackwell was worthless. Derek's eyes narrowed as recognition dawned. Well, little Teddy Blackwell." His voice dripped with the same malicious pleasure Theo remembered. "Still playing hero?" Mason pressed closer to Theo, instinctively sensing danger. Derek stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Whatever game you think you're playing here, Blackwell, end it now. Linda and the boy are mine. Don't interfere, or you'll regret it just like you did in high school." The past and present collided with brutal clarity as Theo realized. His childhood nightmare had become Mason and Linda's daily reality. "You're coming home with me." Theo's voice was firm as he helped Linda into his Bentley 3 hours later. Her discharge papers crinkled in his hand: severe concussion, mandatory rest, follow-up appointments scheduled. "Mr. Blackwell, I appreciate everything, but we can't," Linda began weakly. "It's temporary," Theo interrupted, uncomfortable with the vulnerability in her voice. "Until you're healed, and safer arrangements can be made." Mason pressed his face against the window as they drove through Theo's gated community. Mansions stretched like monuments to wealth, each more imposing than the last. "Oh, whoa," Mason breathed. When they pulled into Theo's circular driveway, the Georgian mansion rose before them like something from a fairy tale. All cream stone and towering columns dot inside, Mason's eyes widened at the marble foyer, crystal chandeliers and sweeping staircase. Linda clutched his hand tighter, clearly overwhelmed. "The guest wing is through here," Theo said stiffly, leading them down a hallway lined with expensive art. He was already regretting this impulsive decision. What did he know about house guests? About families? He opened the door to a spacious suite bedroom, sitting area, private bathroom. Everything pristine, impersonal, hotel-like. This is bigger than our whole trailer, Mason whispered in awe. Linda's eyes filled with tears. We can't stay here. Don't belong. You belong wherever you're safe, Theo said, more gently than he intended. That afternoon, while Linda rested, Mason discovered the backyard pool. Theo watched from his office window as the boy stood transfixed by the sparkling water, having never seen a private pool before. Can I touch it? Mason asked, when Theo joined him outside. You can swim in it. If you'd like. Mason's face lit up with pure joy. Really? In this whole pool? Just for me? When Linda appeared later, moving carefully due to her injuries, she found Mason splashing in the shallow end, laughing with abandon. Tears streamed down her face not from pain, but from hearing her son's laughter after months of fear and silence. Theo stood on the terrace, jacket removed, tie loosened, watching this small family find momentary peace in his carefully controlled world. Something unfamiliar stirred in his chest, something that felt dangerously close to contentment. As evening approached, Mason appeared in Theo's office doorway, hair still damp from swimming, clutching a towel. Mr. Theo, he said quietly. Can I ask you something? Of course. Mason's innocent eyes met his. Can we stay forever? The question hung in the air, carrying more weight than any business negotiation Theo had ever faced. That night, as Mason slept peacefully for the first time in months, Theo sat in his study, staring at old-school photos he'd kept locked away for decades. The memories crashed over him like a tsunami. 15-year-old Theodore, small for his age, cornered in the school bathroom by Derek and his gang. Look what we have here, little Teddy thinks he's smart. Sound of his head hitting the toilet bowl, laughter echoing off tile walls. Day after day of humiliation, isolation, fear, Derek. Stone had made Theo's high school years a living nightmare. Every achievement, every small victory had been overshadowed by Derek's cruelty. The scholarship student versus the popular athlete who thrived on making others feel worthless. You'll never amount to anything, Blackwell. You're nothing but a pathetic loser. Those words had driven Theo to build his empire, partly to prove Derek wrong, partly to ensure he'd never be powerless again. Linda appeared in the doorway, moving slowly, drawn by the lamp's glow. Couldn't sleep either? She asked softly. Theo closed the photo album. How did you meet him? Linda settled carefully into the leather chair across from his desk. Derek wasn't always like this. When I met him 2 years ago, I was a single mother working 3 jobs, barely keeping us afloat after Mason's father died in a car accident. Her voice grew distant. Derek was charming, successful, or so I thought. He promised stability, security for Mason. Said he wanted to be the father Mason never had. What changed? Everything fell apart 6 months after we married. Bad investments, failed business deals. Derek lost his construction company, his savings, everything. That's when the drinking started. Linda touched her bruised cheek unconsciously, and the anger blamed everyone else for his failures, especially Mason and me. Theo's hands clenched into fists. The Derek I knew in school was exactly the same a bully who picked on anyone weaker than him. He hasn't changed. He's just found new victims. You knew him? Linda's eyes widened. He made my life hell for 4 years. Derek Stone has always been a coward who can only feel powerful by destroying others. Through the window, they could hear Mason's peaceful breathing from the guest room. Linda's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was protecting Mason by staying. Derek threatened that if I ever tried to leave, she couldn't finish the sentence. Theo leaned forward, his voice filled with quiet determination. Linda, Derek prays. On fear because it's all he has. But he's not dealing with scared teenagers anymore. The next morning, Theo attempted normalcy with the efficiency of a corporate takeover. He hired the city's best private tutor, arranged therapy sessions for Linda, and converted his rarely used library into a classroom for Mason. I don't understand, Mason said, staring at the advanced mathematics workbook Theo had provided. These numbers are too big. Theo frowned. It's basic algebra. If you apply yourself. He's 7 years old. Linda interjected gently from the doorway. Maybe we could start with addition and subtraction. Heat flooded Theo's cheeks. He'd been so focused on giving Mason the best education money could buy, he'd forgotten what a appropriate actually meant. Right, of course. Theo awkwardly picked up a picture book instead. Would you ... prefer this? Mason nodded eagerly, and they spent the next hour reading together on the library's leather sofa. Theo stumbled through voices for different characters. While Mason giggled at his dramatic attempts, the breakthrough came that afternoon. Theo's assistant called about an emergency board meeting, a hostile takeover attempt that required his immediate attention. He was reaching for his jacket when Mason appeared in swimming trunks. Are you coming to watch me dive, Mr. Theo? I've been practicing. Theo looked at his phone buzzing with urgent messages, then at Mason's hopeful face. Rebecca, he said into the phone, handled the board meeting remotely. I have a prior commitment. For the next 2 hours, Theodore Blackwell, worth $3 billion, sat poolside cheering as a 7-year-old practiced cannonballs. It was the best one yet. Theo called out as Mason surfaced, grinning. Linda watched from the kitchen window, amazed by the transformation in both of them, that evening. Their peaceful routine shattered when the security alarm shrieked. Through the monitor, they watched. Derek stumbled toward the front gate, drunk and screaming, Linda, get out here. Bring my boy. Security guards moved to intercept him, but Derek's voice carried across the grounds like a threat. I know you're in there, Blackwell. You can't hide them forever. Mason ran to Theo, wrapping small arms around his waist. He found us, he whispered. Trembling, Theo pulled out his phone, dialing 911 with steady hands, despite the fury burning in his chest. Derek had violated the restraining order Linda had filed that morning. As police sirens approached, Derek's final words chilled them all. This isn't over. They belong to me. Thunder rolled across the mansion that night, each crash making Mason flinch deeper into his blankets. The storm had arrived hours after Derek's arrest. As if nature itself was responding to the day's tension, Theo was reviewing security footage. In his office, when Mason's scream pierced the darkness, he found the boy thrashing in bed, tears streaming down his face. Derek's coming back. He's gonna hurt Mama. Mason, wake up. You're safe. Theo sat on the bed's edge, unsure how to comfort a terrified child. Mason's eyes flew open, disoriented and fearful. When he saw Theo, he launched himself into his arms, small body shaking with sobs. I keep seeing him, Mason whispered against Theo's shirt. In my dreams, he's always angry and Mama can't run fast enough. Theo held the trembling boy, memories of his own childhood nightmares surfacing. I used to dream about Derek too, he admitted quietly. Mason pulled back, surprised. You did? Every night for years. I was afraid to go to school, afraid to eat. Lunch alone, afraid of bathroom breaks because that's where he'd find me. Theo's voice grew softer. I built this whole company partly because I never wanted to feel powerless again. Did the dreams ever stop? Eventually? Not until I realized Derek only had power over me if I let him. Linda appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her healing face. She watched as Theo gently stroked Mason's hair, a natural gesture that surprised them both. Would you like me to stay until you fall asleep? Theo offered. Mason nodded eagerly. As Theo settled into the bedside chair, Linda lingered in the doorway, seeing a side of Theodore Blackwell that no boardroom had ever witnessed. An hour later, with Mason finally peaceful, Linda found Theo on the terrace, staring at the storm-darkened grounds. Thank you, she said softly, joining him at the railing. For everything, for being there when he needed you. I'm not good at this, Theo admitted. I don't know how to be what he needs. You're learning. That's what matters. Lightning illuminated Linda's face as she studied him. Mason draws you as a superhero, you know, in all his pictures. You're fighting the monsters. Something shifted between them in the darkness, a recognition of shared purpose, of two damaged people trying to protect an innocent child. When Linda shivered, Theo instinctively wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. Their eyes met, and for the first time since Emily's death, Linda allowed herself to imagine feeling safe again. The kiss was hesitant. Janola questioned more than a statement. It was interrupted by Theo's phone buzzing urgently. Derek's lawyer was already filing emergency custody papers. The headline blazed across the business section of the morning paper. Billionaire's charity case. Blackwell Industries CEO plays house with abuse victims. Theo's blood ran cold as he read the article over breakfast. Somehow, reporters had discovered Linda and Mason's presence at his home. Photos showed them entering his car at the hospital, Mason holding Theo's hand at the mansion's front gate. "Mr. Blackwell," Rebecca's voice was tight with concern as she called. "The board is demanding an emergency meeting. Stock prices dropped 3% this morning. Investors are questioning your judgment." Before Theo could respond, Linda appeared in the kitchen doorway, newspaper in hand, her face pale. "I'm leaving," she said quietly. "Mason and I. We're destroying your life." "No." Theo's response was immediate, fierce. "Don't you dare let them win." That afternoon, Blackwell Industries' boardroom felt like a battlefield. 12 stern faces stared at Theo across polished mahogany. Theodore, Chairman Warren Phillips, began coldly, "This situation has become a liability. The press is calling your judgment into question. Some suggest you're having a midlife crisis. Or worse," board member Patricia Hayes added, "that you're exploiting this family for publicity. The optics are terrible." Leo stood slowly, his voice steady, despite the fury building inside him. "Linda Stone and her son are under my protection because they need it. Not for publicity, not for tax benefits, but because it's the right thing to do." When do you make decisions based on charity?" Phillips scoffed, "Since I realized there are more important things than quarterly profits." The board exchanged alarmed glances. This wasn't the ruthless Theodore Blackwell they knew. Meanwhile, at Westridge Academy, the elite private school, Theo had enrolled Mason in 7-year-old. Mason faced his own interrogation. "My daddy says your new dad is just pretending to care," Madison Crawford announced during recess. "Says rich people use poor kids for attention." Mason's small hands clenched into fists. "Theo's not pretending. He reads to me and watches me." "Swim? But he's not your real dad?" another child interrupted. "Where's your real dad?" Mason's eyes filled with tears as painful truths crashed down. The other children sensed weakness and circled closer. Back at the boardroom, Theo's phone buzzed with a text from Derek's lawyer. "Emergency custody hearing scheduled for Monday. Mr. Stone intends to prove Mr. Blackwell is an unfit guardian using your own board's concerns as evidence." The trap was closing. Derek was using the corporate pressure against Theo, painting him as an unstable billionaire playing games with a child's life. From Mason's journal, Miss Peterson's art class assignment, "Write about someone important to you. My name is Mason Stone, but I wish it was Mason Blackwell. Theo says I can change it if I want to. But Mama says we shouldn't get our hopes up about things that might not last. I drew Theo again today. Miss Peterson says I'm getting really good at faces. In my picture, he's wearing a cape like Superman, but instead of an S on his chest, I drew a heart. Because that's what makes him different from Derek. Theo has a big heart, even though he tries to hide it sometimes. Derek used to tell me I was stupid for drawing so much. He said art was for sissies. But Theo hung my drawings on his office wall, right next to his important business awards. When I asked why, he said, because these matter more than any deal I've ever made. The kids at school asked lots of questions. Madison Crawford's daddy is on Theo's board, and she says her parents argue about whether Theo is having a breakdown. I don't know what that means, but it sounds bad. Yesterday, I heard Mama crying on the phone with someone. She said maybe. Derek's right. Maybe we're just ruining Theo's life. I wanted to tell her that's not true, that Theo smiles more now, that he canceled important meetings to watch me swim, that he reads bedtime stories with funny voices even though he's not very good at it, but sometimes I wonder if Mama's right to worry. Sometimes Theo gets that look in his eyes like he's calculating something. Like when Derek's lawyer called about court, and Theo's face went all cold and businesslike. For a second, he looked at me like I was a problem he needed to solve instead of just Mason. I made a special drawing for Theo, but I'm keeping it hidden until I know for sure we're staying. It's a picture of all three of us as a real family, standing in front of our house. Not his house, our house.
Ow.
In the picture, Theo is holding my hand and Mama's hand, and we're all smiling. Derek called the house yesterday. I heard security talking. About it, he said he's coming to take me back. The judges always give kids to their real family. But Derek isn't my real family. Real family doesn't hit you or make you hide in closets or go hungry for 3 days. Real family reads you stories and teaches you to dive and hangs your drawings on office walls. I wish grown-ups understood that. Love isn't about DNA or legal papers. It's about choosing to stay when things get scary. Tonight, I'm going to pray that Theo chooses us. 'Cause if he doesn't, I don't know what happens to Mama and me. The emergency board meeting felt like an execution. Theo sat at the head of the mahogany table, facing 12 stone-faced directors who had built Blackwell Industries alongside him for over a decade. Chairman Phillips slid a document across the table. Theodore, this is an official ultimatum from the board. You have 48 hours to choose. Divest yourself of this. Domestic situation, ... or step down as CEO. Theo's jaw tightened. You're asking me to abandon a child and his mother because it's bad for business? We're asking you to remember your fiduciary responsibility, Patricia Hayes interjected coldly. Stock prices have dropped 8%. 3 major clients have expressed concerns about your stability. The Harrison merger is in jeopardy because they question your judgment. My judgment built this company from nothing. Your old judgment did, Phillips corrected. This new Theodore Blackwell canceling meetings for swimming lessons, housing strangers, making emotional decisions. This isn't the man we voted to lead. Rebecca burst through the boardroom doors, her face white with panic. Mr. Blackwell, you need to come immediately. There's been an incident at Mason's school. Theo's blood turned to ice. What kind of incident? Derek Stone convinced the school office he was Mason's legal stepfather. He took Mason 20 minutes ago. The room erupted as Theo shot to his feet, but Philip's voice cut through the chaos. Theodore, if you walk out of this room now, consider your position terminated. Theo paused at the door, his empire hanging in the balance. 48 hours had become 48 seconds. Then I quit, he said without turning around. His phone rang as he sprinted toward the parking garage. Derek's. The voice was slurred with alcohol and malice. Miss me, Teddy. Took you long enough to answer. Where is he? Theo's voice was deadly calm. Safe. For now. See, the thing about family court. Blackwell, they don't like billionaires who collect children like trophies. But I'm Mason's real father now, legally speaking. You're nothing but a drunk and a coward, Derek. You always were. Derek's laughter was ugly. Still that scared little boy, aren't you? Well, here's the deal. You drop the custody case. Pay me $2 million and maybe I'll let you say goodbye to the kid. Derek, you have until midnight to transfer the money. Try anything clever and the boy pays for it. Just like old times. Teddy, you lose, I win. The line went dead. 30 minutes later, Linda collapsed in Theo's arms when she heard the news. He took him, she sobbed. Derek actually took my baby. Theo held her as his world crumbled around them. In one afternoon, he'd lost his company, and the boy who'd become like a son to him. But as he looked at Linda's broken face, Theodore Blackwell made a promise that would change everything. I'll find him. Whatever it takes. Theo mobilized every resource at his disposal. Private investigators, security teams, tech specialists, tracking Derek's phone and credit cards. His war room operated from the mansion's study, maps and photographs covering every surface, but for the first time in his life, money felt powerless. Derek's smart, Detective Rodriguez explained grimly. He's using cash only, switched phones, and knows how to stay off cameras. This isn't impulsive, it's calculated. 12 hours passed with no leads. Linda paced the mansion like a caged animal, her eyes red from crying. My baby's out there scared and alone, and I can't help him. Theo's phone buzzed at 3 a.m. Derek's voice was clearer now, more sober, more dangerous. Having trouble sleeping, Blackwell? What do you want? I want you to remember what it feels like to be powerless. Remember high school, Teddy? Remember begging me to stop? Rage clouded Theo's judgment. Derek, I'll give you whatever you want. 5 million, 10 million, name your price. Derek laughed. There it is, the real Theodore Blackwell. You think everything has a price tag, don't you? Even love, even family. That's not what I meant. You just proved what I've been telling everyone. You're treating Mason like a business acquisition. Rich man buys himself a family for his image. The call ended, but Derek had been recording. Within hours, the audio was leaked to every news outlet in the country. The headlines were devastating. Billionaire attempts to buy back adopted son, and Blackwell offers millions in family negotiation. The carefully edited recording made Theo sound calculating. Transactional, exactly like the heartless businessman Derek claimed he was. Linda found the news coverage first. When Theo entered the kitchen that morning, she was staring at her laptop screen, tears streaming down her face. Is this who you really are? She whispered. Someone who thinks he can buy people? Linda, that's not the recording, is out of context. Name your price, Theo. My son isn't a business deal. I was desperate. I was trying to get him back any way I could. But Linda was already packing. Derek was right about one thing. You don't understand what family really means. We're not your charity project or your midlife crisis experiment. She left a note on the kitchen counter. Find Mason, then leave us alone. We were surviving before you, and we'll survive after. Meanwhile, in an abandoned warehouse across town, Mason sat huddled in a corner, Derek's drunken rants echoing around him. Your rich boyfriend doesn't really want you, kid, heard the news. He tried to buy you back like a broken toy. That's all you are to him, a tax write-off. For the first time since meeting Theo, doubt crept into Mason's 7-year-old heart. The man who'd hung his drawings on office walls, who'd learned to make funny voices during bedtime stories, had it all been pretend? Theo sat alone in his empty mansion, watching news anchors dissect his every move. The company he'd built was gone. The woman he'd grown to love had left. The boy who'd called him a hero now questioned everything. Derek Stone had won again. Theo sat in his empty mansion, staring at the wreckage of his life. 24 hours had passed since Linda left. 48 hours since Derek took Mason. The media circus continued outside his gates. Porter's hungry for the next chapter in the billionaire's breakdown story. His phone rang. Phillips from the board. Theodore, we're prepared to discuss. Your return, this kidnapping situation, has generated sympathy. We could spin it. Theo hung up another call. His lawyer. The custody hearing's been postponed indefinitely while Mason remains missing. But I have good news. 3 companies want to hire you as CEO. We can rebuild your reputation. Theo hung up again. Nothing mattered except finding Mason. He walked to his office wall, where Mason's drawings still hung 7-year-old's masterpieces, displayed alongside million-dollar awards. Theo studied the boy's self-portrait, a small figure reaching toward a tall man labeled, My Hero Theo. Derek's recorded. Words echoed in his mind. You think everything has a price tag, don't you? Maybe Derek was right. Maybe Theo had approached this like a business acquisition. Provide housing, education, security, problem solved. But Mason wasn't a merger to be completed. Mason was a scared little boy who'd lost everyone he'd ever loved. Theo picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. Marcus. It's Theodore Blackwell. Yes, from the Meridian Club. I need to ask you something about that night you threw out the boy. 20 minutes later, Theo was driving through the city's roughest neighborhoods. Following a trail, Marcus had remembered Derek bragging to bar patrons about teaching that rich boy a lesson at Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar where construction workers drank away their failures. The bartender at Murphy's recognized Derek's photo immediately. Yeah, he's been here every night this week. Real piece of work. Keeps talking about some warehouse where he's holding court. Thinks he's some kind of king now. Theo's blood ran cold. What warehouse? Old Morrison construction site? Been abandoned? Since the company went under 2 years ago, Theo should have called the police. Should have brought backup. Should have followed protocol instead. Theodore Blackwell had spent his entire adult life calculating risks and minimizing exposure drove. Alone into the night to face his childhood nightmare, the warehouse squatted in industrial darkness. Broken windows like dead eyes, Theo parked and approached on foot, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through a crack in the loading dock door, he heard Derek's voice, slurred and ugly. "Face it, kid, your hero ain't coming. Rich boy's probably on his yacht by now, pretending. You never existed. That's not true." Mason's small voice was defiant, despite obvious fear. "Theo promised he'd never leave me. Promises are for suckers, kid. Just like your mama learned." Theo closed his eyes, gathering courage he'd never needed in any boardroom. This wasn't about money or reputation anymore. This was about keeping a promise to a 7-year-old boy who'd called him a hero. Theo slipped through the warehouse's broken loading dock, his expensive shoes silent on dusty concrete. Years of boardroom negotiations had taught him patience, strategy, timing skills that served him now as he moved through shadows toward Derek's voice. The main floor opened into a vast space filled with abandoned construction equipment. In the center, Derek sat on a stack of concrete blocks, like a king on his throne, beer bottles scattered around him. 20 feet away, Mason huddled against a pile of machinery, his small frame barely visible in the dim light. "You know what your problem is, kid?" Derek's words slurred together. "You believe in fairy tales? Rich guys don't save poor kids out of the goodness of their hearts. They do it for the cameras, for the tax breaks, for the ego boost." "That's not true," Mason whispered, but doubt crept into his voice. Theo's chest tightened. Derek was systematically destroying the boy's faith, just like he'd destroyed Theo's confidence 25 years ago, Derek. Theo stepped into the light, his voice calm despite his racing heart. Derek's head snapped up, alcohol making his movements clumsy. Well, little Teddy finally shows up. Took you long enough? Let him go, Derek. This is between us." Derek laughed, standing unsteadily. "Oh, it's definitely between us now. You remember how this works, don't you? I win, you lose. Just like high school. The difference is, I'm not 15 anymore." "No, but you're still the same pathetic loser who wet himself in front of the whole cafeteria." Derek pulled out his phone. "One call to the media and everyone knows exactly where you are. Billionaire breaks into warehouse. Assaults grieving. Stepfather. Your reputation will be finished forever." It was a masterful trap. Derek had positioned himself as the victim again, Theo as the aggressor. Any physical confrontation would destroy what little credibility Theo had left. But as Theo looked at Mason's frightened face, he realized something profound. He didn't care about his reputation anymore. "You're right, Derek," Theo said quietly. "You did break me in high school. You made me believe I was worthless, that I had to prove myself to everyone." Derek grinned triumphantly. "But you know what I learned building my company?" Theo continued, moving closer. "The best victories don't come from force. They come from letting bullies destroy themselves." Confusion flickered across Derek's face. "While you've been drinking and plotting, I've been documenting. The assault on Linda, the kidnapping, the extortion attempt." Theo held up his phone. "Everything's been recorded, Derek, including this conversation." Derek's face went white. Bluffing. Red and blue lights suddenly flooded the warehouse as police surrounded the building. "Am I?" Theo smiled grimly. "Turns out the FBI takes kidnapping very seriously, especially when there's a clear paper trail of domestic violence and extortion." Derek lunged forward, but alcohol and panic made him clumsy. He stumbled into the concrete blocks, crashing to the ground as officers swarmed in. Mason ran to Theo, tears streaming down his face. "You came. I knew you'd come." As Derek was handcuffed, and read his rights, he snarled one final threat. "This isn't over, Blackwell." But Theo barely heard him. He was too busy holding Mason close, whispering, "I promised I'd never leave you. I meant it." The family court was packed with reporters, but Judge Carmen Rodriguez commanded absolute silence as she reviewed the case. Files. 3 weeks had passed since Derek's arrest on kidnapping and extortion charges. 3 weeks of psychological evaluations, home visits, and testimony that would determine Mason's future. Derek sat in orange prison coveralls, his lawyer frantically arguing for leniency. "Your Honor, my client was acting out of concern for his stepson's welfare, Mr. Stone. kidnapped a child, and attempted to extort money. Out. Judge Rodriguez interrupted sharply. This court finds his actions inexcusable, and his claims of paternal concern completely without merit. Linda sat in the front row, nervous but no longer broken. She'd returned to Theo's mansion 5 days earlier, after seeing news footage of Derek's arrest. Her apology had been tearful but unnecessary. You understood her fear. Her need to protect Mason even from those trying to help. Mr. Blackwell, Judge Rodriguez addressed Theo directly. This court has reviewed extensive evidence of your commitment to Mason's welfare. Character witnesses include teachers, medical professionals, and staff members who've observed your interactions. The transformation documented here is remarkable. Theo held his breath. Furthermore, Mason himself has been quite eloquent about his preferences. His victim impact statement regarding Mr. Stone's actions and his clear attachment to you weigh heavily in this decision. She looked directly at Mason, who sat between Theo and Linda, wearing the navy suit Theo had bought him for court. Mason, do you understand what permanent custody means? Mason nodded solemnly. It means Theo gets to be my real dad forever, and Derek can never take me away again. That's exactly right. Judge Rodriguez smiled. This court hereby awards permanent custody of Mason Stone to Theodore Blackwell, with full parental rights and responsibilities. The gavel fell with finality. In the hallway afterward, Rebecca appeared with unexpected news. The board voted unanimously. They want you back as CEO. The public response to your actions has been overwhelmingly positive. You're being called a hero. Theo glanced at Mason, who was showing Linda a drawing he'd made of their family. I'll consider a consulting role. Part-time. My priorities have changed. That evening, Blackwell Industries released a statement announcing Theo's return as chairman, with Rebecca promoted to CEO. The business world buzzed about the new paradigm of leadership profits with purpose, success with soul. But Theo was focused on a different kind of success story. Look what I finished, Mason said shyly. Handing Theo the drawing he'd been working on for weeks, it showed 3 figures standing in front of a house, not the mansion, but a smaller, warmer-looking home. Theo, Linda, and Mason held hands. All wearing bright smiles. At the bottom, in Mason's careful handwriting, my real family. It's perfect, Theo said, his voice thick with emotion. Linda took his hand. We all are. Derek Stone was sentenced to 5 years in prison for kidnapping, extortion, and domestic violence. Mason slowly healed from his trauma through therapy and the security of knowing he was finally, truly safe. 6 months later, the alarm clock in the modest suburban home buzzed at 7 a.m. But Theo was already awake, making pancakes in a kitchen filled with Mason's artwork and Linda's coffee cups, a far cry from his sterile mansion penthouse. Something. Smells amazing, Linda said, wrapping her arms around his waist as he flipped pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Mason's request, Theo grinned. Apparently round pancakes are boring for a Tuesday. The boy himself appeared moments later, school. Backpack slung over his shoulder, hair still messy from sleep. At 8 years old now, Mason had grown taller, stronger, and most importantly happier. The fear that once shadowed his eyes had been replaced by the confident mischief of a secure child. Did you make the T-Rex one extra crispy like I asked? Mason examined his breakfast critically. Of course. What kind of amateur do you take me for? Theo served the pancakes with theatrical flair. They'd moved from the mansion 3 months earlier, choosing a 4-bedroom house in a family neighborhood, where children rode bikes and neighbors knew each other's names. Theo still served as chairman of Blackwell Industries, but his days of 12-hour workdays were over. Rebecca had proven more than capable as CEO, and the company thrived under her leadership. Art show tonight, Mason, announced between bites. You're both coming, right? Wouldn't miss it, Theo promised. Though I still think your lighthouse painting should be in a museum. Mason beamed. His artistic talent had flourished in the safety of their new life. Miss Peterson from his new school called him naturally gifted, and several of his pieces now hung in Theo's downtown office not as decoration, but as reminders of what truly mattered. After dropping Mason at school, Theo and Linda drove to the community center, where she now managed the family assistance program Theo had funded. Helping other families escape domestic violence had become her passion, her way of transforming her own pain into purpose. The Morrison family found an apartment, Linda reported as they walked to their cars. Single mom with 2 kids, finally free from her abuser. Just like someone else I know, Theo said softly, kissing her forehead. That evening, the school art show buzzed with proud parents and colorful displays. Mason's lighthouse painting, the same subject he'd painted during his trauma, now showed a beacon guiding ships safely home through calm waters instead of stormy seas. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Linda whispered, squeezing Mason's hand. "I painted it for us," Mason explained. "The lighthouse is Theo, and the ships are you and me, finding our way home." After the event, they stopped at the same diner where Theo had first taken Mason for breakfast months ago. As they shared a chocolate milkshake, Mason looked up at Theo with those same blue eyes that had first captured his heart. "Theo," Mason said quietly, "can I ask you something? Always? Are you happy? It's like really happy? Not just pretending?" The question caught Theo off guard with its directness, its innocence, its importance. He looked around the simple diner booth, Linda, laughing at Mason's chocolate mustache. Family photos from their recent camping trip scattered on the table. His phone silent for once because he'd learned to turn it off during family time. This was nothing like the life he'd planned. No corporate empire to rule, no mansion to impress guests, no ruthless reputation to maintain. Instead, he had pancake breakfasts and art shows, bedtime stories, and family movie nights. "Mason," Theo said, his voice thick with certainty, "I've never been happier in my entire life." As they walked to the car, Mason slipped his small hand into Theo's large one, and Linda took Theo's other arm. Under the streetlights of their quiet neighborhood, the family that had found each other in the darkest of circumstances walked. Home together, Theodore Blackwell. He finally learned the difference between success and happiness had won.